Hi everyone. Imagine feeling like no matter who you vote for, nothing really changes. Like the people in power don't understand your daily struggles, your economic reality, or your concerns about the future. That feeling of disconnection is at the center of this episode. So today, I'll be exploring the rise of populism in France, and specifically why so many voters are turning away from traditional political parties and towards populism movements. The central question leading this episode is, why do so many French voters feel disconnected from traditional politics, and how has populism responded to that frustration? This matters because it's not only just a French story. It's about how democracies change when trust in political systems begins to erode. Before examining France specifically, we need to understand what populism actually entails. According to Jan Werner Mueller, populism frames politics as a moral struggle between the pure people and the corrupt elite. It claims that only one group represents the real people. Similarly, Moffat shares that populism does not emerge or succeed without crisis spewing into resistance. So at its roots, populism isn't just a set of policies. It's a politician's way of framing politics to appeal to those that need to be heard. Most of the time, in moments when it feels like the system is broken and is not working for you. And importantly, populism is not new in France. It has long historical roots, often emerging during moments of political or economic instability. But before getting into that history, it's important to understand that the feeling that it drives today. In France, many voters have grown increasingly frustrated with traditional political parties. Trust in institutions has declined, and many feel that politicians are disconnected from everyday life. Research also shows that economic pressure and inequality have played a major role in shaping this frustration. But this isn't just a theory, it's something people express directly, and you can clearly hear that frustration in how people talk about what they are feeling. This clip I'm about to share takes place in a dangerous protest called the Yellow Vest Movement.
27-year-old Jimmy Moreno came in from a nearby suburb. He works for the railways and voted for Macron.
C'est le peuple, tout bêtement, sans opinion politique.
It's the people, quite simply, without any political opinions.
Nous sommes dans la rue tous par solidarité.
We are here together on the streets in solidarity.
Solidarité, la politique, notre politique.
Our politicians, our politics are corrupt.
Elle est corrompue.
The yellow vests that Jimmy and others are wearing have become a symbol. A law requires drivers to carry them, so they're easier to spot.
What you hear in this audio clip shows the emotion and reflects the issue of a feeling of being ignored, economically and politically. And this sense of exclusion is exactly what populist movements respond to. They don't just offer policies, they offer recognition, which is exactly what the Yellow Vest protester says. So let's dive into what the Yellow Vest movement really is. The Yellow Vest protests began in late 2018 in response to rising fuel taxes, but very quickly they expanded far beyond the single issue. What started as opposition to a specific policy turned into a nationwide protest movement expressing frustration over inequality, the rising of cost of living, and a broader sense of political abandonment. Before the protests, many participants were not politically active in traditional ways. They included workers, rural residents, and lower middle-class citizens who felt increasingly left out of France's economic and political direction. The movement takes its name from the high-visibility yellow safety vests that all French drivers are required to carry, which became a symbol of making ordinary people visible in a system they felt ignored. According to Moffat, populism doesn't just respond to crisis, it often performs it, emphasizing urgency and tension to gain political momentum. The Yellow Vest movement reflects this kind of political atmosphere, even if it is not itself a unified political party or ideology. Now, as you listen to these protests, it helps to understand them not as isolated anger, but as a part of a broader pattern of distrust and inequality becoming publicly visible.
All of us have had enough. Look around. These guys have had enough.
I don't have enough to live on. I make 700 euros a month. What am I supposed to do with that?
The group included students, nurses, artisans. They don't all have political beliefs, but they carried out unprecedented violence, according to the chief Paris prosecutor.
Now let's talk about if this Yellow Vest movement is a populist movement or just a popular movement, because this distinction is key. The Yellow Vest movement is often described as a popular movement, meaning it emerged organically from ordinary citizens without a single leader, party structure, or unified ideology. This is different from populism, which is a political strategy or style used by leaders or parties that frames politics as a struggle between the people and the elite. The Yellow Vests, on the other hand, were much more decentralized. They didn't have a single leader or party structure, and they weren't just trying to take power in the same way. Instead, they were expressing broad frustration and demanding things like economic fairness and more direct democracy. So while this populist politician may draw on the frustrations expressed in the movement, like the Yellow Vests, the movement itself is not inherently populist. Instead, it reflects the underlying conditions like inequality, distrust, and political disconnection in which the populist actors later respond to. This distinction is really important because it shows that frustration doesn't automatically equal populism, but it does create the environment where populist messages become more and more powerful. This is where we can bring us to the Rassemblement National. Under Marine Le Pen, the party has gained increasingly support by appealing directly to voters who feel economically and politically left behind. Its messaging focuses on national identity, sovereignty, and distrust of elites, but always in a simplified and emotionally direct way. And that clarity matters, because when people feel overwhelmed or ignored, simple explanations often feel more convincing than the complex ones. So where did the transition to populism come from in France? To understand that shift, we need to take a step back. Populism in France didn't start with recent elections. As Javier Reiner explains, it goes back to earlier moments like Bolognism in the 19th century and later the rise of the Front National in the late 20th century. What connects these moments is that they all came out of times when people felt frustrated with political elites and like the system wasn't really working for them. The specific issues changed, but the general feeling of distrust and disconnect kept coming back. These movements often emerged during periods of crisis and political distrust. However, what changed in the recent years was the scale of intensity of public mobilization. And this is where the Yellow Vest movement becomes especially important. According to academic research, and deeper than the frustration we just witnessed, the Yellow Vests were a grassroots movement driven by economic inequality, rising living costs, and deep belief that political elites were out of touch with everyday citizens. They also expressed strong demands for more direct democratic participation. In other words, it wasn't just a protest, but it was a political rupture. And that rupture made widespread frustration visible and undeniable through action as well as the media. So what does this all really mean? Populism plays a complicated role in democracy. On one hand, it gives voice to people who feel ignored by traditional political systems. But on the other hand, as Mueller argues, it can claim to represent the real people, while excluding others and simplifying complex political issues into moral divisions. That turns politics into a conflict between us and them. And that has consequences for how democratic systems function. So wrapping all this up, to take a step back, this shift toward populism in France is not sudden. It is a result of long-standing tensions. But what makes the present moment different is how strongly recent events, especially the Yellow Vest movement, have accelerated that shift. The protests didn't create populism, but they amplified it. They made visible what had been building for years: frustration with inequality, distrust in institutions, and a desire for political change. And movements like the Resemblant National have been able to step into that space, turning frustration into political support. So ultimately, people don't turn to populism randomly. They turn to it when they feel unheard. And until that feeling is addressed socially and economically and politically, that shift is likely to continue and grow. Thanks for listening.